Avast, boys. How long we been on this here pod? Be it 2 years, 2 days, 20 minutes? Methinks it be near Halloween tide, but there is no Halloween at sea. What are we gonna do?
Oh, I reckon we pull out the Bailey watch. And shrapnel the gunplank until all of the wickens be chirping like the marnin do.
Aye, that seems the best course of action. I be Mateys Van Rossum, and I have spilled me beans.
God damn it! You pulled mine!
Call me Ishmael, or Winslow, or Ben. One of them.
Call me Cleve, and I be a disgruntled sailor, for I was being to say, I'm thinking about them beans that ye spilt. Oh, but alas, it's been taken from me.
The beans have been taken once again.
Aye, lad.
Much like my true love, lost at sea. Happy Halloween, folks. It's that time again, and it's our 3rd Halloween episode. And this is our first Halloween episode that isn't particularly Halloween related.
But it is spooky.
It is spooky, and it's not Halloween related for a good reason. We have a special occasion. The Lighthouse is out, and we finally saw it.
Hooray!
Yeah.
For those who have maybe been living under a rock or perhaps in the depths of the sea, The Lighthouse be a 2019 film written and directed by Robert Eggers, also known from The Witch, one of our favorite films on the podcast. It stars Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. It be the hypnotic and hallucinatory tale of 2 lighthouse keepers on a remote and mysterious New England island in the 1980s, 1890s.
Aye, the Thatcher years.
Yar, I biffed it!
I remember 'em's like they were yesterday.
Wouldn't that be funny if it was actually just set in 1980 now?
Amazing.
It's gonna be really hard for me to not do that voice for the entire podcast.
Who says you don't have to?
For the sake of our listeners and their tender
let's,
ears. Maybe we'll
So much fun.
we'll pepper it in here and there.
Aye, peppered like a nice roasted leg of lamb at sea, or a leg of lobster.
Sea lamb.
Aye, that's what they call it, don't you know?
I want to just right off the bat say, if you like The Witch, or if you're interested in this movie whatsoever, and you haven't seen it,
Go see it.
Don't listen to this yet. Listen to this afterwards.
Yeah, spoilers from here on out. I'm not pussyfooting around.
Aye, we're gonna be spilling the beans.
Beans will be everywhere.
Until we're up to our necks in them.
Aye.
Yeah.
It's a great bit.
Spoiler warning from here on out. So this is the second film from Robert Eggers, who we all know and love. What are some of y'all's initial thoughts coming fresh off the back of this beast?
Loved it so much.
Did it live up to your expectations?
It did. It really did. I meant it when I asked if we could see the next showing when we walked out of the movie theater. Like, I already want to watch it again. I wanted to watch it again while we were watching it.
Ben?
I like it.
Yeah, I thought it was incredible. I thought it actually exceeded my expectations, and I actually think I prefer it to The Witch.
Really?
Even
This is early, so I need to let it digest. I mean, we literally just came out of it.
I won't make that claim yet, because when I did see The Witch, there's just so much to take in that I didn't get it all on the first viewing, and my appreciation for The Witch grew with multiple watches, and I feel kind of the same about this movie. I thought it was excellent. I didn't come out of it overwhelmed, but I thought that it was a really fucking damn good film. It's similar to how I felt about The Witch, and I think that on subsequent rewatches, I don't know where this one's gonna land, because it's fucking good, and it feels like a logical succession from The Witch for Robert Eggers as a filmmaker.
Once again, not a sophomore slump.
No, that is yet another...
I think this year has just disproven that concept for me entirely.
This year is the year of the fucking powerful second film.
The sophomore bump, if you will.
I love it.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
2019 sophomore bump, baby.
I think what really elevated this film for me is the two excellent lead performances.
Yes.
Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson both put in A+ performances here.
Yeah, I think if anybody is not sold on Robert Pattinson as an actor at this point, then I think you definitely need to see this movie. I've been sold on him for a little while. I think he has well distanced himself from Twilight.
He set out to legitimize his career, and he's done it.
Yes.
And I applaud that.
Yeah, this is just yet another stellar performance from him, and I mean, when has Willem Dafoe ever given a bad performance?
Yeah. Willem Dafoe in particular steals the show in this movie, in my opinion.
What I like about them as characters playing off of each other is that Willem Dafoe is kind of a caricature. And
he is the old salty sailor incarnate.
Right. Normally, describing somebody as a caricature, I would say would be a bad thing, but in this case, I think it works really well.
This film just embraces
and
archetypes.
Robert Pattinson starts more as the straight man, the everyman.
I think that's why it works, because they're such foils at first. It doesn't feel too over the top per se.
Foils is the word.
And by the end, they've become almost interchangeable. They've sort of joined in a collective madness. I think that this film is a sister film to The Witch in more than just that it's directed by the same filmmaker. It is heavily based around superstition and how superstition can sort of make you go crazy. In The Witch, there's a little bit more of a direct supernatural element, but they both seem to be about a character who is trying and failing to be what they picture for themselves, and sort of, in the end, being granted forbidden knowledge. This film does that much more indirectly, because I don't think there's really any supernatural elements in this film. I don't know about you guys.
I mean, I think it's more ambiguous in that front than The Witch is.
The elements are there to be seen in the film, but are the supernatural elements real?
Explicitly supernatural.
I mean, unreliable narrator. What are you gonna do?
Sure.
Like,
but that's what I mean. That it's nothing explicitly supernatural happens that cannot be explained away as a effect of madness. Whereas in The Witch, in the first 20 minutes, you know there is a witch and magic is being done. There is a legitimate supernatural threat. That being said, the way that the dread is built up in this film as compared to The Witch, I think is done very similarly.
Yes, there's a lot more brevity in this, and I very much so appreciated it. I love The Witch to bits, and I was gratified to see the same director not go all cards misery again, like not to play full on into it, because The Witch is a delightfully miserable film. The family is like misery incarnate from the beginning. They choose misery as a form of life, etc., etc. Whereas this
very
film,
Puritan.
Yes, exactly, and fitting. And this movie, it has a degree of genuine. It has a genuine quality to it for not going that same direction and having lots of moments where you're laughing. And it's often uncomfortable laughter.
Yeah, that's the
too.
thing. I think it's important to distinguish. There's definitely...
It's ballsy.
There's definitely some levity at times. We all did, share a handful of laughs during the film, but I would not describe this movie as comedic.
Yeah, and I don't think that any of those moments undercut the horror or...
No, not at all.
If anything, it brings it closer to you.
Yeah, because the easiest way to deflect horror is with laughter, and it's often used as a coping mechanism for that reason. And there are a few times where there feels like it's it's like a joke or a bit or something to try to sort of deflect the horror of the situation, but it doesn't really.
And by the characters, like they're making any attempt at all to bring some light into this situation. by whatever horrible means they have. I like that a lot. It really does feel like the character's trying for brevity while things are going to hell. I was saying on the way out of the theater that you get a sense that it doesn't care how the viewer feels about a lot of circumstances. A lot of the hard-hitting audio impact sounds come after the dark moments. Have you ever caught that? Like there were like when he finds the body or the head in the trap, the lighthouse sound comes in after, or the instrumental hit comes in afterwards. Sure. So the movie leaves you to kind of figure out how you feel about it first, and then it kind of follows through. It's well appreciated. Like so many other films would have like the building strings and it would want to lead you into a moment of horror and tell you beforehand.
It gives you a second to register what you're seeing as well. Much like just stumbling upon something horrible is like the moment of terror isn't going to be the instant you see it. It's going to be after your brain registers it for a second, and then the screaming starts.
Which is cool because that's even part of like Robert Pattinson's confession, right? Is like after he kills the guy, he says like, and all I wanted afterwards was to have a cigarette.
Right.
Like it hadn't hit him yet. And it doesn't hit him until he's on this island, until he's in this perfectly terrible place for him to have that revelation over what he's done.
Yeah.
That's cool. The film follows that lead. Awesome.
I like how they use that within the terms of the single location. It almost makes the lighthouse feel like a sort of purgatory for the characters. Robert Pattinson's character, Winslow, is trying to escape the whole time, and slowly more and more is uncovered about that, and you kind of see the madness as he tries to come to grips with that and come to closure with that. The claustrophobia of just the single location just builds on that so well.
There's a excellent word for it. Willem Dafoe uses it in his first little monologue, and that's doldrums. I was really lucky. Like, I mean, I grew up like hearing a lot of nautical terms, and I've read like the first 2 of the 20 Master and Commander books, and anyway, I love nautical stuff a lot. And so with The Witch, I was a little more in the dark for the dialogue, and you have to sort of go back and maybe watch it a time or two again to kind of let it all sink in and appreciate it. And this film, I'll certainly have to do the same, for a lot lot of moments. But
There's
I was lucky; I was able to pick up on
a lot of talking in this
more
movie.
than I was expecting to, and I enjoyed that. But point is, one of those things is the doldrums, which is when you're out at sea and there's no wind and you're just caught out. That can affect you for days and weeks at a time, and that's generally when the effects of like cabin fever start to take play. In this case, these sailors only have each other.
Just out with the boys.
Mm-hmm. They have to use booze to cope.
Let's unpack the purgatory thing a little bit.
Sure.
Then, because I think you're definitely onto something that I wanted to mention, is that at a certain point it does feel like they're being punished. That their isolation and their sort of imprisonment is a form of punishment where they lose track of time and just lose track of everything. Purgatory is a really great descriptor for that, and I think that there's a hard line moment where it becomes that.
Oh yeah,
well, where the lighthouse and the island goes from being a maybe somewhat boring and monotonous job to truly being purgatory.
Yeah. Well,
where you cannot leave and you are having to purge your sins from yourself.
The boilerplate of this film can be summed up pretty clearly and cleanly, and I love that. This film, it's is meandering and maddening and off kilter as it is very clear in its intent, and that is consequence for action.
Yeah.
Right. And I love, and it's that Lovecraftian concept of, seeking out that forbidden knowledge, or even, dig this, Promethean. Because what does Prometheus do?
Gives fire.
He grabs
and light.
the flame.
Yeah.
And how does the movie end? The film ends with him grabbing the light and then falling down the staircase to Earth, and him lying on the rocks as the gulls eat his guts. And it's Prometheus. That's Prometheus chained to the rocks as the birds eat his guts. It's a gorgeous shot, and I wish I knew the name of the painter who did that piece. But there's a beautiful painting of that, or not beautiful, but horrifying painting of Prometheus. I love that classical depiction and it's so gratifying to see like those sorts of homages and references done well. Prometheus, grabbing flame is nothing that hasn't been done before. There are many things in this movie that have been done before, but it does them so well.
Well, here's an idea that I had, and I'm not even suggesting necessarily this is what I think happened, but I would like to get y'all's opinion on it. I think that you could make an argument for them dying halfway through the film, and the last half of the film being either a dying hallucination or purgatory, if you would.
Well, the film is definitely non-linear. We see that in several small draws. For instance, Willem Dafoe's limp disappears occasionally when he's dancing, and most importantly,
that's because he's a liar.
Pattinson's hand is burned. He refers to it as tetanus, but it's his hand after he stuck it in the light.
No. That was from him punching the cloth.
Yeah.
And cutting up his hand, and Willem Dafoe telling him he was going to get tetanus from having an open wound. I didn't read that as his hand
that's
being
not how I read it
burned.
either.
Well, it's that retelling. Like it's that the reality keeps changing as they're on the island. At first, Willem Dafoe says that his leg was broken, and then later on he says that scurvy got his leg.
I mean, it's pretty clear that Willem Dafoe's character is a liar.
They're both
throughout.
liars.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is that you're initially in the film looking for who is your reliable narrator. You think it's Robert Pattinson. He seems like the honest, straightforward type. And then you realize that neither of them are honest.
Yeah, no, there's no reliable narrator.
And anything that they've been telling each other this whole time could be lies, which is part of the madness of it, which I like a lot. But I didn't read the film as non-linear. I read it as deliberately mystifying in order to make it hard to tell how much time has passed. But I think all of the events were portrayed pretty linearly.
Yeah, I agree, actually.
I think the unreliable recollections from both the characters is not that things have played out different ways, but that they are just liars. That they are sinful, and that's why they're being punished.
Yeah,
or why at least they feel like they're being punished because they're dishonest.
While I don't agree that the narrative is particularly non-linear, it is very dreamy. There are a lot of scenes where they are hallucinations, but
there's very little to distinguish them from reality.
Yes, there's an ambiguity to a lot of it, which
you don't know whether the
leaves it
film is
open-ended,
telling you the truth either. But back to my point, that I think that you could potentially make the argument for them having died at some point in the film, is that the first half, maybe a little less than half of the film, is pretty straightforward. It's well paced, but it's slow and deliberate and quiet. There's not a whole lot of talking in it. But,
there's a lot of farting, though.
There's a shitload of farting.
The first human noise in the movie is a fart.
Yeah.
Willem Dafoe farts a lot in this movie.
IBS champion.
Hell yeah.
Willem Dafoe.
And even so, in their dinner conversations, they talk about looking forward to being able to go back to the mainland when they're up. But, it's just 4 weeks, and they don't have much of a problem, But then on their last night, before the ship is supposed to come pick them up, Willem Dafoe finally convinces Robert Pattinson to have a drink. Willem Dafoe drinks every night, but for the whole time, Robert Pattinson has stayed sober, trying to be responsible, not fucking around with that. And on that last night, they get insanely drunk. The next day is when all of the crazy shit starts happening, where the madness sets in immediately. It's not even like a slow burn. It's just immediately their, holes in their stories are falling apart and everything like that. And I think that you could read it as they died sometime that night, either from alcohol poisoning or being drunk and running around and, falling off the cliff or something.
Well, I see
or
some
just
of that too.
The water being
as
poisoned.
or the water being poisoned.
I see some of that too as kind of playing into the themes of escape. Because after Robert Pattinson starts drinking, it's obvious that he has an addiction.
Yeah.
You know, he's a bit of an alcoholic.
A bit.
To say the least.
And I'm sure he knew it too, which is why
yes,
he didn't drink
yes.
up until that point.
And the whole thing until then was escaping
Right.
yourself and your fate. Once that kicks back in, it plays right into those themes of accepting your fate and succumbing to your weaknesses and addictions and whatnot.
Another aspect that I really like is in the first half of the film, he keeps seeing this one-eyed seagull that is just like completely shitheel harassing him, like getting in his way, tapping on his window at night, and then flying off. Willem Dafoe keeps telling him, "Don't kill a seabird; it's bad luck."
I missed the seagull being one-eyed.
Yeah,
Is it like an Odin situation? I know Odin's like a crow, but
I don't know.
like, is there symbolism in that? I don't know.
I mean, Willem Dafoe says later, you don't kill a seabird because they're the souls of sailors, you know, so, one-eyed, salty old sailor pirate, you know, whatever. I think that they did that from a filmmaking perspective just so you would know for sure that it's the same gull.
Oh, wait, the head in the
same gull
lobster
every
basket.
time.
Did it only have one eye?
The what?
The head in the lobster basket.
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Oh my god.
It was his soul.
Holy shit. I think you might be right.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's it.
The seagull is the soul of
this
his
is-
former... Oh my god.
This is what you guys get, like, when we record right after watching a movie like this. Like, you get to
Yeah.
hear our revelations in real time.
You're absolutely right. We find out that Willem Dafoe killed his former assistant, and Robert Pattinson finds his head in the lobster trap, and it is one-eyed.
And then Robert Pattinson kills him again.
as the
as
gull.
the bird.
Yeah.
Doing the same thing as him, repeating the cycle. See, it's what I mean about it being a
I mean,
cyclical movie.
there's no doubt that
They're the
it's
same person.
There's no doubt that it's cyclical. Okay,
They're both named Thomas.
Let's talk about that. I was really afraid from the beginning of this movie that they were going to do something like, ooh, they're actually the same person.
Yeah, it's all a dream. He's a ghost.
And then once they revealed that they're both named Thomas, I was even more afraid of that. I'm really glad they didn't do that. I mean, I understand from
I mean, they did. They just didn't make
from-
it a huge plot point. Which
They-
is
yeah.
what I
they
appreciate.
represent each other. Willem Dafoe is supposed to represent what Robert Pattinson can become. So in that sense, they are the same. But I'm talking about literally. I thought there was going to be a literal revelation that they are
Yeah,
the
it's
exact,
not.
that
It's
they
not
are
like
the same
a
person.
fucking Tyler Durden situation or
right.
something.
I was terrified of that.
Well, and the reason it's saved of that is because Tyler Durden still exists in our reality, but this movie, like, the real twist of it is that it's an allegory.
Yes.
Like, and so that's the saving grace. If the film had existed, like, in a reality, that would still be the case. And
Right.
that's where it saves itself, I think, on every front. Every magical realism thing that they pull is relatively justified because it is allegory.
And they start out not being the same, too. Like, the idea is that Willem Dafoe is what Robert Pattinson is capable of becoming and will become and does become.
Sure.
I appreciate that because I was really afraid that it was just going to be, like, the same person.
And
being
it's
the
never
same.
addressed as a twist or anything, and thank God.
Well, because, like you said, it's allegory. It's not literal. Mm-hmm. Robert Eggers is much smarter than that, but it's only his second film. That I went into it knowing that there might be a way that he disappointed me, and fortunately he didn't.
Can we talk about the aesthetic a little bit?
Absolutely.
I was very impressed by the aesthetic. I had read somewhere that they used old World War II era cameras for it.
Like Filmos?
I believe so.
It's surprising
Or
the image quality is so good.
If they did
or
that, that's
or old
insanely
film
impressive.
stock
Yeah.
specifically made for the shoot. It is on a very
have to be made for the
particular
shoot, yeah.
4:3 aspect ratio,
It
which
is black and white.
you don't see very often anymore. The last movie I've seen like that was like Ida a couple years back. But I think the 4:3 aspect ratio works really well in this movie
Extremely.
to build a sense of claustrophobia.
I'm neutral about it. didn't hurt the film at all for me, but it also didn't do anything for me in particular. I do think that it definitely in 2019 is a very bold aesthetic choice that I respect the hell out of.
And black and white to boot.
Black and white to boot, you know. I mean, black and white, you get black and white films that get acclaim and stuff, but it's still more rare, and I think that for this film, it was the perfect aesthetic.
Here's what I'll say. I don't think the film would have worked if it was widescreen and black and white, or if it was the same formatting but in color. I think that the fact that it's both help each other very much, and you get a something that feels like it's out of that time.
Well, and to boot, I think the black and white in this film is very particular since it's shot on old film stock. The whites are very dull for much of it until you get those intense hits with the lighthouse itself, and it really makes them stand out all the more because all the other whites are grayish, throughout the film.
The blacks are very deep. Some of it would be, I would say, verging near underexposure if it didn't look so damn good.
Yeah.
I guess it's not necessarily conventional in that case. I won't say that it's underexposed. I think it looks incredible. Yeah. I loved the cinematography.
Well, it's
the same cinematographer as The Witch.
I do most of my paintings like in black and white before I even approach with color. And this film is an excellent study on comparative contrast. A light only looks as bright as it is next to a darker dark. So if you put a gray next to a light, it doesn't look as light. But if you put a dark next to a light, it looks very bright. And comparatively, if you have a dark and you put a gray next to it, it looks light. So they get away with that most of the movie, where it's really just blacks and grays. And then finally you see these, or at least darker lights. And you see the real lights, and it just has such an impact. So powerful.
I think my favorite shot in the film is during Willem Dafoe's curse, when he's sort of cursing Robert Pattinson for not admitting, when they're both drunk as shit, and he says, admit you fancy my lobster, trying to admit that Robert Pattinson likes his cooking, because Robert Pattinson keeps saying, like, now your cooking is shit. Just during that super long take on Willem Dafoe, when he is, like, hellfire and brimstone cursing Robert Pattinson.
Or seawater and brimstone.
Yeah, seawater and brimstone.
Calling motherfucking Poseidon to drown his ass.
The lighting on his face is
animalistic.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's incredible.
It's so subtle, but the longer you look at it, the less human he looks, and it's literally only a trick of the lighting. And
part of that,
eyes and teeth by the end.
Yeah, that shit just blew me away.
I think
it's such a long take.
It was emphasized a little bit with makeup as well.
Probably, yes.
To really emphasize the darks, because he almost does look inhuman after a certain point. And it's just incredibly done.
It's harrowing.
I was affixed to my seat during that scene. That was really and I mean, a lot of it is just dude's performance. He's a very, very good actor.
The man's a pro.
Willem Dafoe is the fucking man.
Willem Dafoe.
Damn. Good one. Willem Dafoe. The light. Let's talk about the light.
All right.
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's the impetus of their madness, but it's certainly the fixation of their madness. I love how much of a nebulous concept that it remains. I was afraid that we were going to get an explanation at the end, because for the entire film, Robert Pattinson is kept away from it. Willem Dafoe locks it. He's the only one who tends the light. And we see him having sort of a, hypnotized state when he's near it and when he talks about it. And the whole movie is Robert Pattinson trying to grasp that light. And when he does, it is immediately his downfall.
Well, the thing I love about it is there's such a thematic cohesion with it. Throughout the movie, you get these hallucinatory sequences of kind of siren songs and a mermaid keeps
appearing,
pulling the character underwater. Temptation. I see the light itself as kind of a siren song as well.
Absolutely.
That brings people to madness in trying to capture it in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
You know,
because
Forbidden knowledge, that forbidden flame.
right,
the
exactly.
Promethean flame.
I mean, I would say it's definitely more so of a captivation than the siren herself, because when we see her, she is horrifying. He has a couple of fantasies about banging her, but I think that's
Which we do need to unpack.
Do we?
Yes. Yes, we do. They're awesome.
Okay.
are you saying that because tentacles?
Yeah, man. Oh my god, no.
I thought-
I'm saying it, dog. I'm saying it because it was very that sequence reminded me so much of Tetsuo the Bullet Man, of all things. Yeah, very reminiscent for me of Sugimoto, who's often been described as very similar to David Lynch. I haven't seen as many Lynch-esque works. Did y'all get Lynch vibes off of this?
At moments, yeah, I think so.
Specifically that scene. The closest thing I could compare it to with the flashing imagery in black and white was Tetsuo the Bullet Man.
I think you could that scene, if you're talking Lynch, maybe you could compare it to the opening scene of The Elephant Man, but
that sexualization of horror too.
there's
like, it's just really yikes. Big yikes.
there's some body horror. There's a big old fish pussy, which is horrifying.
It also kind of reminds me of the movie we'll talk about next week, The Shining, a little bit.
Yeah.
There are several
I made
what
a
almost
lot-
felt like direct references
a
to The
lot
Shining.
of Shining comparisons.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Similarly, and we won't talk too much about The Shining because that's for next week, but similarly, it's about isolation leading to madness.
And they both feature a scene with a man running with an axe. Yeah.
Limping, a limping
Yeah.
run with an axe. Willem Dafoe straight up does the fucking Jack Nicholson hobble.
The nod was needed, and it was definitely self-aware.
Yeah, 100%.
But back to the fish pussy.
Well, I'd rather trying
What
to
a
move.
transition.
Rather trying to move.
What, are you guys
past-
uncomfortable? I don't understand.
Trying to move past the fish pussy. I am uncomfortable, and that's why that scene was effective. But that's
true.
That's to my point, is that the mermaid, the siren, who lures in sailors with her beauty and her song, is much more monstrous in this film, and Robert Pattinson is often running from her rather than running to her. He
Much
has
like the booze.
he has some sexual fantasies, but they seem to be more against his better judgment. He seems repulsed by the idea.
Well, the idea behind that, how I read it, is even though he's running from it, he can't escape it. Much like he
Right.
can't escape his own fate
in
the film.
That's another
Sure.
There's another comparative to The Witch, right? Because The Witch has those similar motifs about temptation and wouldst thou like to live deliciously.
Exactly.
And The Witch, ends with falling
And she
into
does,
that
yeah.
temptation.
Yeah,
In
exactly.
the same way, and that's
Well, because
rad.
there's nothing left at that point.
Yeah.
Similarly, at the end, when he is finally able to ascend the tower and grasp the light, is because at that point there is nothing left. He has thrown everything away, and that's my point about the lighthouse being exactly like you said, Ben, the true siren of the film. That the literal siren or hallucinogenic siren is driving him away, and he's running towards the light. Much like The Witch, it's that I don't have anything left. I've destroyed everything else. I've thrown everything away for this last thing, the object of my salvation. And then, unlike The Witch with Thomason, another Tom name. Weird. But unlike The Witch with Thomason ascending into the night sky with the other witches, this one ends with Robert Pattinson falling down a staircase.
true.
Which, good subversion. I expected that shot of him, screaming as he opens the light, which was great.
God, the sound design.
I thought that was going to be the
Yeah.
last shot.
I loved it.
I thought they were going to cut to credits after that, but
Same.
Then to have him then fall back all the way back down the stairs, good subversion.
Well, like a true siren, it's not actually salvation.
Oh, no,
It's-
of course not.
It's
No.
punishment and
It's your death. It's death.
It's
yeah,
a false light on the shoreline.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It draws you into the rocks. It does not, warn you away.
Right. Great way to end the film, too. after he kills Willem Dafoe with an axe. Neither of them get out alive.
One last thing I want to touch on really quick, and we mentioned it just a second ago, is the sound design and the music. Both just excellent,
So
excellent
good.
stuff. I love how they use the Lighthouse's siren as kind of a
The
motif.
signal horn,
Yeah, and kind of at times an element of the madness itself because it's so loud and overbearing and it's constant.
The score is by Mark Corvin, who also did the score for The Witch and also the score for In the Tall Grass, that new Stephen King Netflix movie that just came out.
Oh, splendid.
I've been meaning to watch. And I saw he also did the score for The Terror, which is a very good show. The sound design in the score is incredible. The Signal House blast, like they start the film with that, it really becomes maddening by the end.
Yeah, because it carries on throughout the whole film. It's like the one consistent.
Yeah.
If you don't see the lighthouse, you hear the horn.
Yeah.
Always. Wow, and it never gets old.
I mean, it's a great
From an
effect,
entertaining
but it's
perspective, like,
yeah,
I
no,
never got tired of it.
it definitely feels maddening, but in a good way, because you're supposed to be losing your mind with these characters, and that does a great job to do that. Repetition, man.
Also, the mermaid, like, really wretched, like, orca scream.
Oh,
Call,
yeah.
like the dolphin like sound that even like Pattinson does during his orgasm is
Oh, yeah,
so
when he's jerking off.
horrifying, man. Like yikes. It's just
That's another great example of sound design, because in that scene when she's washed up on the shore, she's laughing at him, but they cut out the sound and just replace it with that screaming. So she is laughing, but that is the sound that's coming out. That's really wretched.
it's so spooky. And like flashing to the face of the person that he killed, and like
Yeah.
the stabbing of harpoons and that like sexualization of violence and penetration. Yikes. Just horrible.
Yeah.
Like, just deeply unsettling, frankly. One last thing, too, about the ratio is that there's a lot you can do with a near square ratio. Your composition largely changes. It's not broken down any longer to an x and thirds in the same way. Like, it's a much cleaner, like, singular x. There's a lot of wonderful shots that always key in towards the center. There's like
So a lot of
walls
symmetry.
and objects,
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
always like in the center of the shot. Only once or twice does it feel like it's splitting the shot. Usually, it feels like it's drawing you into the middle.
Their early dinner scenes with the single light source on the table, the lantern.
It would have been, I believe, less effective in a wide format because you don't have your extended sides to ground you. You're left rotating. Any side can be the floor, and it's never overworked or overdone. It's always quite subtle. But
I mean,
my
there's
favorite,
several shots where it's straight up rotating.
just circling. Yeah, it's true, but it's
Where
not.
the camera's rotating.
You know, like, and it's always used for like a very clear effect. Again, if you had your sides to ground you, you would have felt like the camera's rotating. Mm-hmm. And not only for like your vertical sense of directionality, but also like up to down, in that the shot before the last ends with him like rolling down the staircase with this beautiful just downward shot, direct down
Of the spiral,
the staircase,
yeah.
and it fades into the sky, and you just have this feeling of inversion before the camera pans back down to him on the rocks. And it's just such a wonderful transition, because you're just sent up and then down again, and down sort of becomes up.
Yeah, I really like how that last shot of him on the shore being eaten by the gulls, as it pulls out, there's kind of a soft white vignette around it. Like in context of the shot, it appears to be fog, but as it pulls out, it almost makes it seem like he has become part of the light.
Yeah.
That like it's pulling out and the light is sort of closing in around him, and that even though he has died, he is now within the light. I think it's a really excellent way to close the film, as it cuts to credits right after that.
And then we get treated to a
definitely
wonderful sea shanty.
Yeah, sea
Yeah.
shanty credits and the exact same font for the credits as The Witch.
It's gonna be his MO.
I hope so. It looks good. He does what he does well.
The state of the house changing was excellent, and how it all begins to fall apart. I love it's never directly said that Willem Dafoe is working him so hard so that he falls asleep from exhaustion at night so he can get up to whatever to his lighthouse hijinks. It never directly says that.
Well, we never actually see Robert Pattinson going to bed either. His days almost always end with some kind of hallucination, and then he wakes up. A lot. And I think that is a really great way to make the viewer lose track of time as well.
I mean,
there's
Inception,
yeah.
does the same. There's some wonderful examples of that.
Yeah,
for
it's like
sure.
he's always
not showing the going to bed. Just
he's
showing
always
the
waking up, but he's never going to sleep. That happens a lot when they're
What
drinking,
an eternal
too.
hell, honestly. God, could you imagine? I would not want to be waking up forever. That's literally the worst.
It escalates in the second half when they're getting insanely drunk every single night, like to extreme excess, and those scenes always just end and then they wake up. Like there's never there's never any going to sleep. I love that when they run out of booze, they just start drinking oil.
Lamp oil.
Yeah, and he mixes it with honey at the end. Is that what he's trying to do? And when they're sitting at the floor of the lighthouse, he's got the oil and he like dips something into it. I think he was trying to mix it with honey to make it taste better.
Well, because the only other goo that we see in the movie is the octopus goo from Willem Dafoe's butt.
Yeah. Which
we also didn't unpack.
I mean,
I don't know if that I think that says it all, really.
that kind of falls just under the category of Robert Pattinson's many hallucinations in the film.
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty directly, explained. That's why he's farting so much. Is there's an octopus way up there, big old squid,
making lots of goo.
Yeah, because there's a lot of shots of his stomach, of Willem Dafoe's stomach too, just to give you that horrible sense of dread that there's something in there that's. Ugh.
And we know now what it is. It's an octopus making goo.
Yep, way up there.
It's shitting out goo.
Yep.
Well, I think that's a great place to drop a rating.
It's an unsettling movie, people. It's deep. Don't let my jokes lead you astray. It is deeply unsettling.
Well, why don't you start with your rating, Cleve?
5.
Okay.
Easy peasy.
Ben.
No muss, no fuss. That's a 5 for me.
I love how open-ended it is. Some movies with ambiguity like this, it just leaves it vague. Where this movie, it has such a thematic coherence and through line that it never feels vague, while it's still open-ended and open for interpretation in a lot of respects. And for that reason, I feel like it's very literary in a lot of ways, how you can go back to the well multiple times with this. It's a very rich movie in that respect. It's also incredibly done. The acting is incredible. It's a 5 for me as well.
I'll just go ahead and give it a rating, and then I have one more point I want to bring up, because I think you made a really excellent point that it manages to be esoteric without being vague. I'll just go ahead and say that, yeah, this is an incredibly solid film. It's a really excellent character study, 2 powerhouse performances, gorgeous cinematography, so much to unpack. I don't think you can possibly do it with one viewing. Yeah, I'm going to give it a 5 as well. So that's another perfect 5 out of 5 for The Lighthouse.
2 in a row.
2 in a row.
Indeed.
Now, the last thing I want to unpack on the subject of being vague is when we were driving home from this movie, I started thinking about Hagazusa.
Oh, I was gonna. Yeah, I know.
And how this film, all of my problems with Hagazusa, everything that I brought up in our discussion, this film is the example of how to do those things right.
You're so right. And you know what? The difference can be summed up, I think, like this. Inherently, it is the difference between a student film and a film that is studied by students.
Sure.
Right? How you unpack
this
the
is
symbolism,
only
how you
Robert
do with it.
Eggers' second film, though. Like, it's barely past a student film from that perspective.
Yeah,
you know?
and I feel like that's a really easy crutch to
I don't think you're wrong, though. As somebody who has been a film student, and the idea of wanting to make a film that replicates your favorite directors but also has like its own implicit meaning, but not being able to fully realize that.
Yeah, and riddled with symbolism, etc.
I can recognize that.
There's a lot of elements of The Lighthouse that I think could be comparable to a student film. The fact that it relies so heavily on allegory for its through line, the extreme stylistic choice.
Well, rather these are things that film students tend to focus on more so than anything.
Well, that's the thing. I think it works in this movie because it's not about the details. It's about the bigger picture with the details adding towards that.
Well,
Whereas
all
stuff
those
like
things.
Hagazusa is so focused on the details that it loses the through line and the main themes and ideas.
Well, right, that's the thing. The Lighthouse is
I agree.
The Lighthouse is a film that is an excellent example of madness being analyzed from a superstitious perspective. And that's what Hagazusa is all about. Like, what if mental illness in the Middle Ages, equals witchcraft? Well, like, this film has that same thematic through line, but it does it in a way that is not completely empty. We don't need to get too much into it.
Or shit on Hagazusa, that much. But listen to the episode about it. We didn't hate it.
No.
Well,
Y'all did, but I
no,
liked it.
Ben did. I was just above hating it. I liked enough of the elements. But anyway, The Lighthouse does much better what Hagazusa sets out to do.
Agreed. Agreed.
I think
100%.
they have very similar goals, but the outcome is markedly better in The Lighthouse. That's all that I wanted to say on that matter.
I'd be willing to believe that a lot of people are not going to like this movie. I'm worried about its ratings, but I love the hell out of it.
Really?
It's been getting
people
very
have
good.
seen,
Yeah.
been loving
It's been
it.
good
Yeah,
for
never mind.
I mean,
preliminary
just like The
reviews.
Witch, The Witch has been surprisingly well received by normies, I would say.
Because it's a really fucking good movie.
Well, that's the thing. It's very slow and atmospheric, but it's so
I think
atmospheric
I
that
think
it
The
kind of
Witch
breaks that threshold for a lot of people.
I think The Witch has kind of gained more renown too as it's been out longer. Like, it's been on Netflix for a while, which is a good get for a movie like The Witch.
Yeah.
But like when it first came out, it felt very small. It had such a limited release, not that many people were talking about it. And I think that because of its growing acclaim over the last few years, I think that's really helped out this film.
Yeah, and there's so many people.
There were a lot of people in our theater.
Yeah, there were. And there's so many people I've talked to over the past couple of years who aren't even into horror movies, but they love The Witch.
Yeah.
And I think that's just because it's so immersive, detail-oriented, while having those thematic through lines, that it just crosses the threshold beyond genre film to something greater. And I think this film hits that as well, so.
There's another comparative movie that we haven't brought up yet. That's Shape of Water.
I mean, in the fish fucking sense only, Cleveland. And
I'm done.
And this was much more horrifying, as fish fucking should be, than romanticizes in The Shape of Water.
I'll leave that up to subjectivity, but
All right,
I like Shape
well,
of Water, but no.
on that note, why don't you give us a word from our sponsor?
This week is brought to you by Thomason and Sons of Thomas and Sons. Cod Luber Oil. Yikes! Are we sure we want these guys as a sponsor? I don't know how I feel about that.
You're the one who found them, Cleve.
I didn't find shit. This was just in the sponsor shelf folder.
Well, then you better keep reading it.
Oh man, I really don't want
The
to.
sponsor shelf will be mad if you
Yeah,
don't.
I don't want the
we
punishment
can't
of
get
the sponsor shelf.
Oh man, how do we get in this kind of a pickle?
Tell us about cod luber oil.
It's for have you ever?
But don't get too blue. This is a family podcast.
Yeah, of course. I would never dream of such a thing. Cod luber oil is for those lost at sea who've had a long series of nights without being able to move their tall ships. And if you want to do that, you better drink your cod liver oil. Move those tall ships.
Fish pussy.
No.
Fish pussy.
No.
Well,
No. Absolutely not.
well, as always, we thank our sponsor for their generous sponsorship
You can.
of this podcast, Cleveland.
Don't anger it.
How are we going to get paid otherwise?
I don't know, man. Are we okay? All right, fine. Thank you, sponsor.
Yeah, thank you, sponsor. Now, next week, in preparation for Dr. Sleep, we gonna talk about The Shining.
With a special guest.
The Shining and a special guest. It must be Christmas, but it's only Halloween.
Yep.
I mean, The Shining is obviously one of our big classics that's been on the list for forever, but
Spoiler, we like it.
When is the right time to talk about The Shining? Well, before the sequel comes out, I guess. So get ready. Here we go. But until then, make sure to sail your tall ship on over to Apple Podcasts.
Keep thinking about those beans.
And Avast. Spot the 5 stars and set sail for
Good ratings.
for a good review. Or you can also follow us on Twitter at podpeoplepod and at letterboxd.com/podpeoplepod for the list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those reviews. We got another golden pod 2 weeks in a row. Bing, bang, boom, unanimous 5s.
Couldn't be more different 5-star movies.
Right, from Troll 2. If you haven't listened to last week's episode on Troll 2, go do so. It's great. We had a fucking awesome time. And yeah, so you can also follow me on Twitter at Mr. Van Awesome.
I'm at Mr. Sheets.
I am tweeting for Light Arc Studio as we continue to develop our kick-ass, super spooky game, It Stares Back. Go check it out. It's in early access on Steam. You know the deal. You sure do.
And
Yar.
the drill.
And the
Yar,
drill.
she
know
be $6. Ahoy.
it. At the time of recording.
Yeah, at the time.
And probably listening. Unless you're in the future.
All right, well, happy Halloween, folks. Hope you got a lot of candy and got to dress up as something spooky and watch some scary movies, because 'tis the season, and that's the reason that we are the Pod Boys, and we are setting sail for spookier waters.
Toot toot.
Yarr!